and it's my colleague Gary Dorr, and we work in the pesticides team here at the APVMA. And I'd like to thank you for clicking on this video link and spending some time to listen to the information around the new spray drift management tool and permit 93132. So I'd just like to give you a little bit of background to the APVMA spray drift policy and buffer zones in particular. And then we're going to talk about the permit and the use of the spray drift management tool. My colleague Gary will take you through a presentation on the use of the tool. And finally, just to give you a little bit of idea around the scope of the permit and the purpose of it. So by way of background, the APVMA spray drift policy came into being in 2010, but underwent a significant development with a new policy issued in 2019. And this policy is available in the form of our spray drift risk assessment manual on our website. And in particular, it sets out our approach to managing the risk to certain sensitive areas. It sets out standardized label instructions with regards to spray drift, and it's backed up by new drift data and drift curves, which are supporting the spray drift management tool or the calculator that we use to set the buffer zones on the label. So you'll be aware that there are 4 types of application method that are covered within our spray drift policy. And so we set buffer zones with regards to the use of boom sprayers, vertical sprayers, and aerial application either by fixed wing aircraft or helicopter. There are 5 sensitive areas that we consider when we do our risk assessments relating to spray drift. And these can be grouped as followed. So for the environment, we have concerns around spray drift into natural aquatic areas, pollinator areas, and non-target vegetation, which can either be neighbouring crops or native vegetation areas. We also consider the risk to human health, in particular deposition into areas which we cover with our bystander buffer zone. And also a concern around livestock areas from a residues and trade perspective. So briefly, the spray drift management tool as a calculator, just want to sort of explain to you what happens in the background. So from this graph here, you can see that we have a blue line, curved line, which is the drift curve. And this will be relates to the method of application and the droplet quality that you select when you use the calculator. The red dotted line, think about it as the acceptable level of drift with regards to each of those sensitive areas that I've discussed before. And where those two intersect, this effectively sets the buffer zone for that particular method of application and that sensitive area. So the spray drift management tool itself is an Excel-based calculator. It's currently used by registrants and the APVMA to set the buffer zones that you see on the label. And there are a range of parameters that you can select which will have an influence on those buffer zones. So in this case, you can see for boom sprayer that we have 6 application parameters which would have an influence on the size of the buffer zone. Now, with all those choices, obviously would lead to a greater complexity on the label. So in this case, we have 6 or 7 rates of application, 2 boom heights, and you can see already that there are a significant number of buffer zones and that relates to boom sprayer application alone. So you can imagine with other application methods and greater choice, the label would become very complex. So the use of the spray drift management tool by yourselves as grower applicators gives you the ability to make those choices based on your own local considerations, and the modified version of the spray drift management tool that we're making available to you is preloaded with 40 products, primarily for use on cereals and fallows. The permit is available for 5 years, and it's for use throughout Australia, and it's held by Grain Producers Australia, hence the focus on the cereal and fallow uses. The tool itself can be downloaded in conjunction with a copy of the permit from the web page from which you access this presentation. When you do use the calculator, please make sure that you include a copy of the output and the unique ID number with your spray records. We also require that you subscribe for updates, and then again, a link to where you can do this is contained on the web page. And this is so that we can notify you of any changes to the existing calculator, mainly because we would be looking to add new products over the time period that the permit is available. So I'm going to hand over to Gary now, and he's going to take you through the use of the calculator. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Hugh. And what I want to just go over the next little while is just a very quick rundown of how the spray drift management tool works and what's required in the running it. Basically, there are 3 screens that you'll have access to within the spray drift management tool. There's this initial opening screen, which gives just a bit of basic information about the tool and how it works, and some instructions like relating to colouring of the input and adheres to conditions. The next screen is where the main input information occurs. So here it has the starting with some just basic information in the name and any company detail address from the operating. And probably the best hint on how to work this thing is to start at the top and work down. So if you always start at the top and work your way down, you should get to the outcome. So you've entered your user details. The next selection there is the product. We have, as Hugh has mentioned, preloaded about 40 products into the tool. And in this case, just for a way of example, we're going to select that we're going to be using the New Farm Herbicide Advanced 700 selective herbicide. The next section down is the application rate details. And you can see for this there that ISO rate is allowable between 200 and 1500 mils per hectare. The Herbicide Advanced label may have higher rates for other uses, but in this case we are limiting it to the more cereal fallow uses, and that's the highest rate for these uses. So you can enter what the rate you want to do. So 1500 is the top, but say we are not going to use it at the 1500, we're only going to use the 1 litre per hectare. So we can select that into the values. Once you've got the rate set, then you can go down and look at the application equipment and the weather details. For the products we have allowed for boom spray, aircraft, helicopter, the availability of the equipment will depend on the product and the label conditions for what you have selected. So in this case, we are going to apply it by boom spray. What droplet size that you're going to use, so that 2,4-D has able requirements of a minimum of very coarse, but you can use extremely coarse, ultra coarse spray. So in this case, so if we were to go just with the label minimum of very coarse spray, we are going to say operate at the 1 meter release height and a 20 kilometre per hour wind. And that's our parametering things. So once you've got that page set, you can go across to the spray drift management tool conditions. And these are the instructions that do need to look at for and keep with your records. So yeah, it's important there that you keep a copy of these conditions with your spray record. The conditions are set out so it lists the products that's using, and then they have the generic spray drift restraints that you would be familiar with appearing on most newer labels now. Below that, you have the specific instructions relating to the application technique. So in this case, we are looking at a boom sprayer. We had selected the spray droplets are not going to be smaller than a very coarse. The release height 1 meter, wind speed between 3 and 20 kilometers per hour. And this is the buffer zone. This is there. Below, at the bottom there, we've just got for information purpose what the label condition would be. So in this case, see that if we had selected the maximum of 1,100 litres, 1.5 litres per hectare, we would be having a buffers of 60 metres for the aquatic areas and vegetation areas. By using the 1 litre, this has reduced down to the 40 metres. And the part down the bottom is your use the name taken from the input entry, the date this is accessed, and there is a code relating to that. And yeah, as mentioned at the top, it's important to keep a copy of all of this information in white with your spray records. You can do that by printing out the copy, taking a screenshot, a photograph, a copy of the tool, but it's important to keep a copy of this with your records. So if we just go back to show some of the bit of advantages and what can be done through use of the tool. In this case we had there, but say, yeah, we really can operate lower than the maximum release height of 1 meter. So if our spraying condition speed is sufficient that we can get down to 0.5 meter, you can see there that that's further reduced the buffers down to, in this case, 15 meters. And if you were not spraying with a very coarse, but you went to an ultra coarse spray, see the buffer zones have reduced down to 0. And that's the basic operation of how the tool will work. There's a little bit there. This is for a single-use product, but some products do have a mandatory tank mix, and you can do it based on there. So just to demonstrate that, if we were to go to the frequency herbicide, in this case, it's an option to whether it's owned, but we are using it as a mandatory tank mix that is on the label. On the frequency label, it has an option that you can mix branoxanil or MCPA. In this case, we will go with MCPA, and labels indicates that the MCPA concentration is only at the 570 grams per litre. So you'll see that that's coloured red, which means it's not a valid entry and there's no in the conditions. So to move forward, you need to select that to the 570 grams per litre. The next part goes down is should enter the actual name of the product that we're using. You see that this one's in a light blue colour. That means it's not checked or validated by the tool, but you should ensure that the product that you enter there is actually an MCPA 570 grams per litre product. Moving down to the application rate, you can see there that the frequency is again in red, because the frequency is only a rate of 200 mils per hectare. So if we were to change that back to the 200 millis per hectare, that's sort of kind of blue and all acceptable there. So the conditions have come up for that option. You can independently set the rate for the frequency and the tank mix partner. In this case, you could enter between 440 or 600 mils. But in this case, we'll have the main driver for the buffers is the frequency. So the rate of the MCPA product in this case doesn't make too much difference, but for other ones it can be driven by either of the products. In this case, we're still going to stay with the boom spray operation, but you'll see the aerial applications is no longer selected because it can only be applied by boom sprayer. And for frequency, you find that you're not limited to very coarse. The label does permit down to a medium spray. So if you're going down in those situations for a medium spray, 0.5 metre, and you can see the conditions there that the main concern here is a larger livestock area buffer of 120 metres, and that is what is on our label conditions. So, and again, you would have the option, so say you are not going to be applying with a medium spray, but you want to go to a very coarse spray, and you can see in this case the livestock area buffer has gone down from 120 metres to 30 metres. So that's just a very quick demonstration of the flexibility of the tool, as well as using it to change and select buffers and conditions depending on your actual treatment things, rather than relying on just a label, which could be set at the worst case scenario you can alter to your conditions. But it can also be a useful training and tool to see what effect different operating parameters do have on their on spray drift buffers. That's just a very quick run through, and I'll hand back to Hugh to finish off the presentation.
Thanks, Gary. So just to conclude then, we hope that you find the use of this calculator beneficial. The purpose of it is to support the growers and to reward best practice by being able to reduce buffer zones for good practice, such as using coarser droplet sizes, reducing the boom height. So you'll pretty quickly see, as Gary's illustrated, that the interaction of those variables can have a significant effect on the size of the buffer zone. It would also, we hope, lead to a better understanding of the influences on spray drift and the choices you make, and ultimately it will simplify the product labels. So I'd like to thank you for your time. We hope that you find the use of the calculator beneficial, and please provide any feedback or issues that you might have using the spray drift email address on the web page. Thank you very much.